We talked about hay analysis, but before we get to that step, we have to sample the hay. And although the farmers do that already, but maybe the customers might buy several different lots or several different farmers' hay. So we need to show you guys how to do hay analysis sampling at home so you can have a good representative of the hay you bought. So now we have a drill that's attached to a hay probe. This hay probe has the cutting edge at the front. So when you drill it into the hay bale, it will penetrate it through and collect all the hay inside. And then after that, we will take it apart and use the...
And then we use this rod to push the hay through.
Yes.
To remove it. And then we go take another core.
Yes. So one core on one bale usually, and we usually do it at this face, this side of the bale instead of from like the side, because that will give us more representative of several flakes in this way instead of from the side we might be just getting one flake out of the whole bale. And Danny already mentioned that you guys can take 15 to 30 bales of the samples and mix them together to get a good representative one. And that is very true. So if you're at home, find at least 12 bales of hay and then do the hay core probing. If you don't have a probe, you can buy it online for about $150. But also you can talk to your extension agents in the county or in the university. They might have one to loan you.
So we are slightly unprepared for this video. We only have a small baggie for this, but I will show you the process now. We're going to take our drill and we're going to press it into the bale. And I need to change the speed setting on this. I press it in all the way and then pull it out. And then we're going to take our rod and insert it and place that end over the bag. And then we press the hay out. And I don't really know exactly how much hay is in each probe, but you're going to end up with something along those lines most often. And you want to end up with, though, about with half a pound, a half to a full pound of hay if you want a really thorough analysis. And so we're at this part of the stack, and then what we would do is we just move along the stack, continue to shake. Cores, and we would just walk down the stack, probing the bales until we are able to fill our bag, and then we are going to send it off to our laboratory. A lot of times your lab, if you go online, you can actually get a placard that you can fill out what you would like, what kind of analysis you would like done. You can list the minerals. There are several different packages. So if you have a lab that you have been recommended or that you found online, contact them, and they usually can give you some sort of card to fill out that you can insert into your bag. And that way, when it gets to the lab, they know what you want and they can perform the proper analysis.
Thank you for showing us how to do the sampling, but I have a question. How do you guys usually sample the different lots and different cuts? Do you guys do it separately or is it able to be combined?
Yes. So typically, we test everything by the field. So when we're considering a lot, it's going to be that field and then at that cutting. So each cutting, for each field, we do them individually. That way, we can have a good, clear picture of what is actually in the hay. If we take this field and that field, our fields are between 60 and 125 acres, and you add those two together, there can be a lot of variation between those two fields. There's even a little bit within 120, just one single 125 acre field. And then we most definitely do it after each cutting, just because, as we mentioned in the earlier video, there's typically a wide variation in the qualities based upon the cuttings. And so for us to feel that we're giving a good representation, we like to test each field, each cutting.
And for general horse owners, if you don't have huge lots of hay that you store in your place, you can still sample about like 10, 12 of them to send up for analysis. At that time, you can combine even if you get it from different hay producer, because that's what exactly you're going to feed to your horse. And sometimes, unfortunately, we will get moldy bales because of climate conditions or some other accidents that happen. So now we are going to talk through how to identify a moldy and dusty bale, and also how do you handle that when that happens. So here we have a relatively moldy and not so good looking hay. So when you look at it, you will find that the colors are a little bit more dark brown compared to the other layers of hay. And yeah, as Daniel pulled it up, you can see dust coming out. And this is very dusty hay that we don't want to feed to our horses. If you find a lot of these hay in your bales, it's usually because they baled it in a high moisture level. So actually they kind of combust inside and fermented inside. That is what happens. And you don't want to feed this to your horses. But do you include this in your analysis? That depends. If you're going to dilute them and feed it to cows, you might want to do it analysis including these, so you get a good representative, and you might want to add a mycotoxin or other screening panels in there with your hay analysis package.
And one thing to note is also the smell. There's a distinct smell of fermentation, and then also when we're looking at this dust, it's almost a powdery white dust, as opposed to some hay will have actual dirt or dust from the field, but this is a very distinct powdery fine dust that is accompanied by this smell. That's how you really can know that the dust that you're seeing is from the mold.
So we talk about hay sampling, a little bit of hay analysis, and some hay judging that you can do when you go purchase a bale. Now we want to talk about the production management part. So there are hay analysis every year that you send out for the samples, and you get the report back. And from year to year or from season to season, do you see a difference? And does that influence your management practices?
Yes, so we do notice some differences. For example, on our second cutting, the last couple years we've been trying to improve the quality of our big bale hay so that it can be dairy hay. And so what we learned was that on our second cutting, in order to get a higher testing protein and RFV hay, we had to cut our hay earlier. So our first cutting, we usually cut at that, you know, late bud stage that's 10% bloom or less, but maybe just a little bit of bloom. And what we learned from comparing hay tests from year to year previously is that on our second cutting, we actually have to cut our hay a little bit earlier than what we had been historically so that we could see that test improve. We've done that the last 2 years. We've actually been able to get our second cutting, which used to always be, 170 RFV, maybe 19 protein. We've been able to get that up to 185, 190, and 22% protein. Another thing that we just started doing this year is that we can actually, we've started comparing our tissue tests, the analysis that we do of the plant while it's actually growing, for which we historically do just to see if we're meeting the plant's nutritional needs. We're looking at the phosphorus, the potassium, the calcium. making sure that we're fertilizing properly. But one of the tests that we are able to view in our tissue test is the concentration in nitrogen. And nitrogen is actually protein. And so when you have your forage analysis done, they are able to take the nitrogen content of the plant and they have a calculation that they use, and that's how they reach their protein concentration within the feed analysis. So what we've just started doing is we take that nutritional analysis of the tissue while the crop is growing, and we can look at that and we're like, okay, there is this much nitrogen in the growing crop. Now let's take that and compare to the forage analysis that we get after harvesting, and we're trying to build a correlation between the nitrogen in the tissue test and the protein content in the forage test. And we haven't reached a conclusion on that yet because we just started doing that. But essentially what we're trying to do is be able to go out into the field and determine when we want to harvest the plant and also how we want to harvest it. If we're going to try and make it into dairy hay, which needs that really high protein, or if we're going to shoot for equine retail hay, and we're going to take all of our samples of those over years and compile them together and try to create a new way for us to be able to better manage when we harvest our crop and have an expected RFE and protein from that tissue analysis.
And what Danielle meant by nitrogen is protein is because there's an equation to calculate that. And all of the amino acids, which is the building blocks of protein, they all have nitrogen in there. And there's no method that directly measure the protein. So they measure the amount of nitrogen and times 6.25. That's calculated by molecular weight and etc. So that's how they get the crude protein percentage by measuring the nitrogen level.